Let's get some reaction for you this afternoon about these latest crime stats. I'm joined now by Calvin Rafadi, crime expert and forensic investigator at BizzTracers. Calvin, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. When you look at these numbers, I mean, I'm just going to zoom in just for we start there about murder. The number of people murdered, more than 6,000 in between January and March. But when you look at the year on year, we're still higher by 10%. It doesn't seem the police are able to bring down the murder rate in our country.
Good day, Braden, and good day to your viewers. Yeah, indeed, it shows that the police now, we need to diagnose what could be the problem in the subs-divisions because of the numbers are going higher and higher up. And I mean, if you check one statement whereby they say most of the murders and most of the rapes, they happen in old abandoned buildings. So it shows those are crime scene, but what are they doing? They could have demarcated those places or even call the owners to either renovate those places or even put up a board that says this is a crime hotspot. But it shows that they don't know what they are doing at this particular time.
Yeah, and our women and children continue to bear the brunt of most incidents of domestic violence.
Yes, indeed, indeed. I mean, if you look at the incident of yesterday, and condolences to the family as well, in Shoshanguve, whereby, I mean, the community themselves, they say, I mean, the kids, they walk at a place where there's bushes around, and then they get pulled into those bushes, they get raped, and eventually now it took the government now to take recognition of such a crime, whereby communities are now, there is a crime, an innocent soul has died, and they tell them that abandoned places like this, where there's no grass cutting of that bush, and today now we hear that abandoned buildings, people are murdered as they go past those buildings. So it shows that, you know, we really need to work hard and put pressure on police as well.
Yeah, I mean, the contact crimes, just generally contact crimes in our country, continue to be on the rise. I'm sure they will differ province from province when you drill down into the numbers. When you have these numbers, Calvin, how should we interpret them in the bigger context of fighting against crime in our country?
Look, there are crimes that are committed. It's your GBV, and then you get crimes that are committed. Let's say the road rage. People, they fight one another, and you get women that are killed. And I mean, these criminals, they either use a force of a knife or a firearm. But now let's take, for instance, Braden, issues about firearms. You know, I just learned a few days ago that there are so many cases in court which gets withdrawn. The reason being the ballistic laboratories, they are not exempted from this load shedding, this pandemic load shedding. So what happens, Braden, if they take those guns now to the ballistic laboratories, as they are processing them now to find out who are the real owners or how many murders have the gun committed, and then the machines, because of the load shedding, they get stuck. And many cases now, they end up being withdrawn at court because of this so-called backlog at the ballistic laboratories. But at the same time, you know, I was talking to my team that, you know, in the police station, you get your visible commander. Now, the visible commander is the one that collects the intelligence within every community that will now give it to the detective commander and then the station commander as well. Now, they just verify on every information that how valuable that information can be used, who are the syndicates in the area. And once that is done, then it's an organized crime, and then many crimes can be sorted out. But I believe, you know, many visible commanders, they don't know what they are doing, or they are not properly doing their job, including the detectives commanders. And that's why we see backlogs and even cases go unresolved in many incidents.
Yeah, you know, you've mentioned these abandoned buildings that it came through in the presentation of the crime stats earlier by the police, that they are hotspots, they are hotbeds of crime, of violent crime. But you just mentioned issue of organized crime. And according to the latest crime stats, alcohol and drug-related offenses are also causing more violent crime.
Yes, indeed. Alcohol is it's a big problem, and unemployment as well. I mean, most of the GBVs, people are frustrated and they shout one another. They end up holding one another by hands and then committing these particular crimes. But alcohol also plays a big role in some of these contact crimes. But here's the thing now, Braden, also for a take home for the police. Most of the rapes that happen to our kids or even our teenagers is because they go night clubbing or they go partying or even at a restaurant and they spike their drinks. There are syndicates that goes around and they target these girls. They say, hey, today I want to sleep with such a girl. There's the girl. And then they spike their drink and then eventually they end up raping them. So we urge some of our teenagers, communities, that they need to be careful that whenever they've got a drink in their hand, this particular alcohol, they must move around with it. They must not leave it lying abundantly around because they spike those drinks and then they end up being raped. And only the next day they find out. And many cases they get opened in this space as well.
Yeah, and we are seeing this troubling trend in rising violence. And Begikele, the Minister of Police, when he was speaking earlier, Calvin, as part of the presentation of these stats, he said it looks like, of course, the police authorities are not managing to prevent the death of a single South African. But he says we are not. I'm quoting him. We are not getting out of the tunnel, but we can see a little light, a little bit of light. We just hope it's not the train. He's not even confident that it's not a train. He's hoping it's not a train.
Yes, brother, and that's why I'm saying if one has to diagnose, if one understands the industry of security cluster, police forum, and visible policing, that's why we say if it comes to a push, the stations or the police stations that are not performing, let's change the visible commanders, let's change the station commanders and the detective commanders, because it clearly shows that they are not performing in their duties. I mean, if we have to check their performance appraisal, it shows that the crime is increasing where they are liable to handle those particular stations. So what we are saying is, I mean, recently the government has bought a grabber. They call it an eNCA catcher, whereby it intercepts the phones, it can listen to the phone. I mean, most criminals, they are very sophisticated with the help of some of these officials, whereby they know they use throwaway phones or Chinese chippers. And that's why, again, we see most of these machines, they get stolen from the police pound, and they are used on political officials. I mean, if one has to ask how many machines were stolen before that were bought at this price, there's quite a few. I know of two, by the way. And especially towards the election, they buy this type of machines, they disappear. And these machines are meant to deal with crimes, and especially organized crime.
Yeah, and when you talk about machines like those disappearing, I'm reminded about guns that the police capture, and sometimes, and many times, they're found back in the hands of criminals who then use them to commit armed robberies or murder as well. So the police also need to tighten internally these leaks, let's call them that, for a lack of a better word.
Yes, indeed. That's what I'm saying. One has to diagnose the problem. We start from the inside of our house. And the inside of our house, it's the rotten police also that we come across in the police sector, whereby they help these criminals. Some of these police, they even go as far as escorting some of the drugs and even illicit cigarettes as far as from the borders. And another problem that we are sitting with, most of the police reservists, you find them with blue lights on their own cars. And we always say that the blue lights, they don't identify the person. They identify the description of where you are working. I mean, it should be a state car, not your own vehicle. And you find them escorting cigarettes as far as from Beitbridge, Mozambique. Some they even escort illicit stuff around. And those are the things that when you've got strong station commander, detective commander, visible policing, let them strengthen their intelligence and work around that and root out the rotten apples in the police force as well.
Yeah, there seems to be so much to fix, but we remain with a concern of rising violent crime in the country. Year on year, the numbers don't lie, as presented by the police, and also we see an increase in domestic violence in places like Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, with gun violence and killings in KZN of women and more rapes of women in Gauteng. You mentioned the rape and murder of the young grade 12 learner, Miss Malachi, in Soshanguve last week. It just doesn't seem to be ending. Kelvin, if this stats, just I want to get a view from you as a crime expert and a forensic investigator, if these stats are to go down, how can the police effectively make a dent on them?
Yeah, well, you know, but then we must also not shy away. There are good police out there that are doing a great job, even though some of them, the resources, they are lacking resources. I mean, you go in a golden city like Johannesburg, commercial crimes, which they investigate complex crimes to follow the money, Ponzi scheme, and serious white-collar crime. And you find 3 detectives sharing 1 vehicle. But we are happy that we heard that the resources are going to be pumped in. So, but what we are saying, we mustn't shy away also that the justice system, meaning at courts, there are brown envelopes that are moving around. So also in the Justice Department, they need to strengthen their balls, because there's a lot of brown envelopes and people are not getting justice. Now, some police, they go hard working, and then they will arrest the suspect, but the next day they see them in the streets. So they build that, that character whereby, somebody will say, I'm in Rome, let me do what the Romans do. And then they end up not, the morale of police gets deteriorated by also the justice system. But one needs to say, we mustn't shy away. There are brown envelopes in the Department of Justice Systems, and there are good police, but the rotten apples, they must be thoroughly investigated and be rooted out. And we can be able to sort out most of these stats to bring them down.
Thank you very much for your time, Kelvin Rafadi, crime expert and forensic investigator at BizzTracers, just discussing some of the aspects about the crime stats that we released earlier for the quarter Jan to March by the Minister of Police. Now,